On the morning of March 24, 2015, Germanwings Flight 9525, carrying 144 passengers, took off from Barcelona, Spain, heading to Düsseldorf, Germany. What was supposed to be a routine flight became one of the most shocking and tragic events in aviation history. By 10:41 a.m., the plane, an Airbus A320, had crashed into the French Alps, killing everyone on board. What happened on that flight? Was it a mechanical failure, a tragic accident, or something far more sinister? Flight 9525 took off from Barcelona at 10:01 a.m. after a 26-minute delay. Captain Patrick Sondenheimer, a seasoned pilot, apologized to the passengers for the delay and assured them he would make up for lost time. In the cockpit with him was 27-year-old co-pilot Andreas Lubitz, a relatively new pilot, having joined Germanwings in 2014. As the plane climbed to its cruising altitude of 38,000 feet, everything appeared normal. Sondenheimer discussed routine flight operations, mentioning he needed to use the restroom. Lubitz assured him he could step out whenever he needed. At 10:27 a.m., the plane reached cruising altitude. Shortly after, Captain Sondenheimer left the cockpit, leaving Lubitz in control. What happened next would change everything.
Open the door!
Lubitz locked the cockpit door from the inside, preventing anyone from entering. He then input a command for the plane to descend rapidly, reducing the altitude setting from 38,000 feet to just 100 feet. The autopilot complied, and the aircraft began its slow, deadly descent.
Let me in.
At first, passengers felt only a slight drop, unaware of the horror that awaited them. At 10:33 a.m., air traffic control in Marseille noticed the unauthorized descent. They tried to contact the plane multiple times. No response. Over the next few minutes, several more attempts were made to establish communication, but still no answer from Lubitz. By this time, Captain Sondenheimer had returned to the cockpit. Finding the door locked, he frantically entered the access code, but nothing happened. Lubitz had overridden the controls. Desperate, Sondenheimer began banging on the door, shouting for Lubitz to let him in. But inside, there was only silence. Andreas Lubitz sat calmly, breathing through his oxygen mask, as the plane descended at 3,500 feet per minute. By 10:38 a.m., the aircraft was dangerously low. The passengers, now fully aware that something was horribly wrong, began to panic. Many left their seats, trying to understand what was happening. Sondenheimer, still outside the cockpit, pleaded for a crowbar to break through the door. As the plane continued its deadly dive, the French Air Force scrambled a fighter jet to intercept. But it was too late. Just 3 minutes later, at 10:41 a.m., the plane disappeared from radar. At 700 kilometers per hour, Flight 9525 slammed into the French Alps, instantly disintegrating upon impact. When rescuers arrived, they found nothing but wreckage. There were no survivors. The crash site was a scene of devastation, with the plane reduced to pieces no larger than a few meters. Victims' remains were scattered across the rugged terrain. Among the 150 victims were passengers from 21 different countries, including Germany, Spain, the United States, and Turkey. The loss was felt worldwide. Just hours after the crash, investigators recovered the cockpit voice recorder, commonly known as the black box. What they heard was chilling. Lubitz had deliberately crashed the plane. The recording captured his calm breathing as Sondenheimer and the flight attendants desperately tried to break into the cockpit. In the background, alarms blared, and passengers' terrified screams filled the cabin. Andreas Lubitz said nothing. The data from the flight's second black box revealed even more disturbing details. Lubitz had rehearsed the crash earlier that day on a different flight, lowering the plane's altitude while the captain had momentarily left the cockpit, only to reset the controls before anyone noticed. But what led Lubitz to commit this horrific act? To understand, we must look at his troubled mental health history. Lubitz had a long history of severe depression. In 2009, he had left Lufthansa's pilot training program due to psychological issues. Although he was later deemed fit to fly, Lubitz struggled with ongoing mental health problems. In the months leading up to the crash, his condition worsened. He experienced anxiety, insomnia, and vision problems, and doctors suspected he might be suffering from psychosis. In fact, Lubitz's doctors had declared him unfit to work just days before the crash. But he kept this information hidden from his employer, tearing up the medical note that excused him from duty. He was determined to keep flying, at any cost. The Germanwings disaster was a turning point in aviation. It exposed critical gaps in pilot mental health assessments and cockpit security protocols. In the aftermath, airlines around the world implemented new rules requiring at least 2 crew members to be in the cockpit at all times. But for the families of the 149 victims, these changes came too late. The pain and loss they suffered could never be undone. The Germanwings tragedy remains a haunting reminder of the importance of mental health in all aspects of life, especially in roles of high responsibility. Andreas Lubitz's decision to end his life was a tragic and devastating one. But taking 149 innocent lives with him makes this one of the darkest chapters in modern aviation history. If this story moved you, please remember to like and subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.